All right, as we start up, then I wanted to show you a couple things. If you please look up on the screen here. I fiddled with this a little bit, okay? And I looked at it in here, and then I went into the code mode, and I looked at the numbers that were in there. All right, and why? Well, I want to show you quickly why I did that. That is, if you may or may not have noticed this before, but if you're in design mode and you click right here, I always say it looks like a football. Somebody else told me it looks like a root beer barrel. I don't know. But if you click there, you can go to landscape, and that doesn't look terrible in landscape. Now, my stuff isn't going to show probably on the screen because of the width. I'd have to shorten up the size of, you know, the text size, etc. my fields. But you get the idea. I fixed it because originally this calc button was pushed way over to the left corner. The exit button was pushed way over to the right corner. And it's just a very easy way for you to see, because a lot of times what happens is, oh, that looks great. But then if you've got an application that you want to let people open up in either portrait or landscape mode, you'll want to check them both. Does that make sense? All right. Now, what I'll show you later on when we start talking a little bit about the Android manifest file, you can set it up so it's portrait or it's landscape only. But I will tell you, this isn't a threat, but I'm just telling you, if person A in here does their final project and you don't do that, I'm going to try looking at it in both views. And if it looks really crummy under one view, you will get points taken off. Does that make sense to everybody? So like I said, if it's a game and you're like, no, it should just be landscape, then you'll set it up for its landscape only. That's fine. I have absolutely no problem with that. Okay? All right. So the other thing is, going into the code, I made a bunch of changes to it, like I said yesterday, because while in between emails. So the first thing is, I decided that rather than having one thing that said height blank and another one that said weight blank, I just was going to have one. I'll show you why when I run it in just a bit. This program isn't perfect. I changed a bunch of stuff on it. All right? So that was about the only thing in here that I can think of that I changed. I did come back in and I reset up my click listeners like this. So you can see this. So you'll have a copy of this. Now the reason I did this is I looked, and when I had the old click listeners in, the ones that we've learned, all right, you may or may not have noticed, but if you double clicked on those controls, it came back and said that basically that was deprecated or darn close to deprecated. So they recommended that you do it this way. All right. So, like I said, that's that. So when you look in here, I changed this around. Look at the driver. If you look on the screen, please. I put the driver into a try catch block because the check that I had put in there, the check for not having any input, was not working. And I looked at it, and in here, it was giving me an error message in here. And it said it was a number format exception, and it was an empty string. Well, I had tried doing what I did that didn't work on a previous program last semester, and it worked. And now it doesn't work. So I put this whole thing into a try catch block, and what I said in here was, notice when you get down to the bottom, I did a catch. I just did an exception. I could have done a number format exception. I said, hey, if you throw in any exception, just return. Now, that's about as cheesy a way of getting out of something as you can come up with, just so you know. All right? But now, think about it. Somebody's playing a game, and something goes wrong. Do you really want to give them a lot of information? You know, I guess it depends, you know, on what you're doing, when they're doing it, etc. All right? But I just decided to do it like that. And I did the same thing for the weight one. And if you look on here, what I've done is I made two checks. This was in here before, exactly like this. All right? And when you look in here, let me get into the routine. So this is to validate. This got cut way down, but it says here, hey, if this is out of range, return is 0. All right? I said that before, and you saw that yesterday. But if you do catch a number format exception, return a -1. And it was just a different number. I mean, I could have chose any numbers that were 0 or less. It wouldn't have mattered. Those happened to just be the ones that I did. So I put all that stuff. There's a bunch of try-catch blocks in here. Most people will tell you that, hey, I hate try-catch blocks. They slow program down, they this, they that. The problem is sometimes if you don't put them in, it's very hard to get your program to work without them. All right, it depends on the consequences. I probably could have taken more time and thought of how to do this without try catches, just so you know. All right, but I just decided to do this. Now, what's going to happen, you're going to see it because I'm going to run it for you in a minute, is it doesn't work and give you the correct thing all the time. Okay, then I thought, well, what would I have to do to make it give it the correct thing? And I thought to myself, what I probably should have done is like with that number format exception and with if there was nothing in there, etc. The way I should have handled it is I should have written my own exceptions. And I should have thrown those new exceptions. All right? I thought of that about 5 to 10 last night, and I'm like, I'm not staying up any longer. So I went to bed. All right? And like I said, I didn't do it, but that probably would have made more sense to do that, just so you know. Much of the other stuff, the majority of it didn't change. Now, Mr. Breeding was nice enough to point out to me yesterday that I was having a problem with the toast here. And guess what? Even after everything was correct, that toast, forget about what's in blue, that toast is not working. I don't see anything that's wrong with it, but it's not showing on the screen. So what I did was I took my final results and I put them into the text view instead. Then they worked. I even came in here, and as you can see, there is nothing that stops you. There's a lot of ways you can do this. We're going to talk about a different one today. But I put a system.out.println in there. All right, and that's just going to print it in here, right? Now, I would take that out if I was going to actually, try to download or send this to the App Store or whatever. All right? But there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. All right? And I guess you can't see it in here, but what I'll do is I'm going to clear this whole thing. Just right mouse click on it, choose clear all. All right? And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to run it. I'm going to show you where some of the problems are still in here. So let me run. This is what it looked like. If you look right there, that's what it looked like when I ran it, as far as the stuff being pushed way over, and I thought, that does not look good. I don't know. I was going to say, I don't know what that was, but here it comes. All right. It looks different than it did when I ran it this morning, because this was not pushed over like that. It's okay. That's fine. But notice now if I put nothing in here and I click calc, all right, I do get the message here, no height inputted. See this down here? The message comes up. But for some reason, it's something I did, but I don't know what. It's not showing there. So I have to go back and look at that. Now, if you go in here and notice if I put something out of range now, so I put 1,111, all right, oh, that was it. Oh, I did get click clear. So if I put in 1111 and I click calc, I do get the height inputted, less than 12, etc. If I change it back and I change my height so that it's something like, that's valid, like 77, and I put in an invalid weight, I get the invalid weight message. That's good. That's what I wanted to have happen. But there's a lot of mixes you can do. You can fill in one, leave the other one blank. You can, and then reverse that. You can put an invalid value in one and a valid, etc. You get my idea. All right? It doesn't handle every case. But when I do come in here, and let me clear and notice, because this is how I typically do this with 111. So if I calculate, you'll notice that it does say underweight like it should. I can clear about 166, and that should be an optimal weight, and it is. I'll clear again, and I'll make it about 200, and that should be overweight, and it is. And finally, I'll clear it one last time and put in 333 pounds, which is obese, and that worked. And click clear. Now notice if I click exit, okay, wait. Exit. There. That stuff all prints, but my toast doesn't show. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I will continue to look at that. All right? A lot of times it's something real simple, and that's why I overlook it. All right. But like I said, that's where it is right now. If that helps you at all with what you're working on in your programs, fine. Otherwise, you do have a copy, and if you don't want it, just get rid of it. All right, but I thought I would at least make it available to you. All right, and again, when you look here, you just saw how that printed in there. Well, I looked right here. Look, in call the toast. So I'm in that routine, and all that stuff is there. It's not like it's not being set up for the toast. All right. I'll look at it if and or when I have time. So, all right. So with that said, I'm going to jump back into here, and we left off yesterday on around, I think it was page 50 or so. There will be stuff in here that I will explain to you and show you, but it will not make a boatload of sense until you go in and try it. Do you understand what I'm saying? And the first thing is this logging statements. I wish I wouldn't have stopped my run, but I'm going to start it up again.
Would there be any reason why Inver City it doesn't open?
Not that I know of. Yours isn't opening?
Yep.
Well, it's giving you an error or just not opening?
It's just not opening.
Well, did you try to Google it?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at right now.
Okay. Not that I've ever heard of. Anything's possible. All right. So as we look in here, the first thing they talk about is adding log statements to your app. And please look up on the screen here that if you add log statements, and we'll look at it in just a bit, but if you do add log statements, what happens is, let me get down to here. There's a thing down on the bottom, if you look on my screen here, I don't know if you can see me looking at the way bottom here, that says logcat. And that will show you anything that you log out. So you can write what are called log statements. Why would you do that? All right? Because while the program's running, you can print out values, you can print out messages, you can print out that you've gotten into a routine, etc. So it can be used as a debugging tool. Again, if you decide you're going to put logcat statements in, or they're really log statements, totally fine. But if you're ever going to make this a thing that you're going to want people to put on their phones, etc., on their tablets, no, get rid of those before you submit it to the App Store. All right? And, Nicholas just asked the question, did you ever have Visual Studio, or not Visual Studio, Android Studio not come up before? No. But today, I was working on a program, and I got this warning message. And I realized I was setting a value, this was in C#, I was setting a value of a variable that I wasn't using in my program. And it was basically just telling me that. Then I looked, and oh yeah, I was using it. So the error didn't make sense. So what I did was, I commented out where I declared the variable and the 3 places it was being set. Are you all with me? I saved it, all right? And what did it do? It still showed me the error that was now commented out was wrong. I've never seen that before where it was just a warning, but I've never gotten a warning before on a line that's commented out. That didn't make sense to me. I ran the program, but then when it finished the run, it must have done something where it reset some system files because then that warning was gone. All right? I'd never seen that before. So, it's software. Stuff's going to happen. All right. Now, I don't use log in nearly as much as I should. Probably if I would have yesterday, I would have maybe found the answer to some of these questions. And look on the screen here. So they give you an example right there, log D. There's different kinds of logs that you can do. All right? There's I believe the D is debug. There's a log I for information. There's a log W for warning. There's a log E for error. Now, the reason that that's important is if you put a log statement in and you put it in, it's like, hey, this should never happen, but just in case, and you do a log E, it appears in red. All right? Not only that, and they don't do a great job of explaining it here in the book, and I probably won't either, but when you look on the screen here, the first thing is you'll notice that there's drop-down arrows here. All right? And if you go to verbose, that's typically what you're going to want, but you can actually put something in here, and there's search criteria. So if you're searching for something special, you can put that in there. All right? And as it says, no debuggable process. Well, there's nothing there. All right. I don't have any log statements in there, so it's not showing me anything, all right? But you can put those in. It is another way in which you can do debugging. Now, it says by convention, log tags are defined as constants for the activity as shown right there. All right, something like this. Okay? And then this is the tag right there, and that's what you want it to say. Now, you're not going to put a log in there that says hello world, but again, you can print out the value of variables. All right? You can print out, and I've done this kind of thing before, where if you want to see if you are or are not getting into a routine, you can put a log statement in there. All right? So it says after you add the log D, then they go through the steps. It says if the logcat pane is not already open. I just showed you how to open that. All right? Now you're going to get something that looks like this, and in this case it's not going to help very much. But as I said, it's quite often used, so if you want to see if you are getting into a routine or are not getting into a routine. And you can print out actual variables in there as well. All right. So next they get into talking about layouts and resources for the UI. And again, I never know with this. When I taught this class a year ago, I just kind of gauged it by the people in the class. We went over this first, and then we did a program like we did yesterday. I think it makes more sense to do it the other way and to go through a lot of code and look at it and then go back and say, hey, because then you got kind of a point of reference that you can have. You may or may not agree with that, okay? Now, if you remember when I brought up that simple program at the start of class yesterday, and I said it didn't work because I didn't put in their view V, they explain about views here on page 52. As it says, your user interface is a hierarchy of views. Every element on the screen is essentially known as a view. And if you are going to be doing something where you are at least potentially going to be manipulating any of these elements, you'll want to put view V or view, whatever. You want to be passing that in. All right. It says the Android system provides hundreds of predefined view subclasses. We have already looked at text view. We have already looked at edit text. We have already looked at button. All right. There's nothing special about image view other than it allows you to bring an image in. All right. And we have already looked at the constraint layout. So you've seen some of this stuff already. I don't know if we're going to scroll view at all, to be honest with you. We will have a whole section of this book that's going to talk about Recyclerview. All right, so what isn't in here that we haven't discussed, you're probably going to see at one point or another. As it says, you can define a view to appear on the screen and respond to a user tap. All right, and that's kind of what we're doing. All right, if you had your phone, if you had this hooked up to a physical device, as opposed to hooking it up to the emulator, on your phone you literally would have those buttons on there for the program we just did. You could tap them and make stuff happen. All right. All right. They talk about layout resources. We're going to be getting into that stuff later. All right. Then it says view group groups. View elements can be grouped inside of a view group, which is a container. Well, the constraint layout is an example of one. They give you some examples. Technically, at least in my opinion, anytime you put stuff in a layout, it's in a group. It's grouped together inside of a layout. All right? And again, you don't have to worry about the stuff right now, but then they show you this picture here. All right? And it says layout view groups. You've got to look at it this way, that if you go and ever take the time to go into the Java API, the Java Application Program Interface, they explain how all this stuff is set up. It's not a fun read, but you can take a look at it and see how different things are set up. But it's very much in a hierarchical type of arrangement, all right, where you've got some kind of a package and you've got a bunch of stuff under that, and some of that stuff will have stuff under that, and some of that stuff will have stuff under that, etc. And quite often it goes down several layers deep, all right? Now, when you talk here, if you look on the screen, these are examples of some other layouts. All right, you'll notice there's a linear layout. Now they're showing a linear layout vertical in 3 columns, but you can also create a linear layout that's horizontal. So imagine that you were looking at that on its side. All right, you can create a relative layout. The grid layout, the thing about the grid layout, you may or may not be able to tell, each one of those squares you see in there is the same size by default. All right, and then there's a table layout, all right, and where you can go in and basically, it's kind of like using Flexbox that we talked about, you know, a year ago, or grid, where you can set some stuff up and you can have your own customized screen. That's kind of what a table layout is in here. It says learn more about the different types. As always, this is going to bring you back to, I believe, developer.android.com. There are other layouts other than what they've mentioned here. Okay? All right. So they show an example of a linear layout. I'm not going to run through this right now. I mean, you can take a look at it. And there shouldn't be a big thing in here that's a surprise. So the whole thing in this case is in a linear layout. You could have made this just as easily in a constraint layout, just so you know. All right? And it used to be that a relative layout, when I taught this class, that was the default. But they changed to constraint, I think, about 2 years ago. Could be wrong on that date, but I think it was around then. In this particular example, you got a button here, a text view here, and a button there. All right, and it's with one of them, you keep clicking the button, and the number that you see right here just keeps going up. It's a fairly simple example, as you'd probably guess. All right. Then they talk about the layout editor, and it says you define layouts in the layout editor. You've seen this picture or one like it already. You know that you can either, when you are creating your layout, you can go into the XML file, and you can do it that way, or you can do it in the design mode and do it this way. You also know, because we talked about this, that if you click up over here, you can make this is typically called like the blueprint or whatever, you can make that go away if you want to. Now, and no one's asked, but you know, I always wonder, why is even that important? All right, and it has to do with certain settings that are in your. Let's see if I can show you. I'll click on a button here. All right. So if I go down here, I don't know if buttons are an example, but I think they are. Okay, you see this? It's hard for you to read, I understand, especially back there. But this says text. Then underneath it says text, and there's a wrench there. All right? And what that means, I believe that's the one that's going to show up in the blueprint mode. So if you wanted to put something in there, but not have it actually show in the thing itself, to my knowledge, that's how it's used. Now, could I be wrong? Of course. All right, but that's to my knowledge. So you can look through here, and again, you know, the palette, the componentry, we've talked about all this stuff already. This picture of the layout editor toolbar, it's changed since 2018, so it's not going to look exactly like this. There might be a couple things that are there, that are on there that aren't there anymore, and vice versa. All right? So they get into constraint layout, and I have not talked with you about everything that's in there, such as these things, but again, if you look please up on the screen, I'm going to bring this back up. There are some things up here we did not talk about. All right? So for instance, if you look, can everybody see where I've got the mouse at least, and you can look on your screen? About halfway over there, there's a thing that looks kind of like a magician's wand. And if you put your mouse over it, it says Infer Constraints. All right, you see where I am? And if you click that on a particular control when you put it in, it'll try to set constraints up for you. Now, that's not bad news, but it's being done implicitly. In other words, it's being done by the software. So it might not be what you want, but it is a way that you can quickly set up a bunch of constraints if you want to do that. So if you were dummying up or mocking up something, it would be a quick way for you to do it if you wanted to do that. All right. Next to it is the button. That's the one I was looking for yesterday that says clear all constraints. Okay? And I believe if I click here, I'm not going to do it, but I believe if I click on the screen itself and I choose all constraints, I believe that it'll take everything that's been set so far in here and clear them all out. There is, to my knowledge, if you do that, there's no undo. Like, you can't do a Control Z and make them come back again. To my knowledge, I'm not going to try it. All right. Then right next to that, way on the right, it says guidelines. And I believe those work with this right here. Okay, with these constraints that are in here. And I've said this before, but I want to make sure you're aware of this, and that is, you don't have to use the numbers that are in here. You can put your own numbers in. All right, I've never tried to put in a negative number. I just hit me right now. One of you raise your hand. Can you put in negative numbers? I've never tried, so I don't really know. All right, but you can put in, and sometimes you might want to do that just to have some more control over that. And as we make our way up here, so notice we've got default ENUS, and it's the locale for preview, but there are other languages you can set it up for. If you look here, I've got the default theme right next to it, but you can change the theme if you want. This has got the version for the API that we're using. This has got the, as it says, the device that we're using. So right now it's a Pixel. It's not the one that we're running it with, but it's the one that they're using. And notice you can click on there, and there's a bunch you can choose from. So for instance, if I wanted to see how this was going to look on a tablet, I think at least there's something in there that I could choose. All right. And I believe that if you set it, it stays set. So you can change it, and you don't have to change it back again. Night mode, this one I already showed you. Again, portrait mode or landscape mode. The one next to it we've already looked at, design mode, blueprint mode, or both. All right. And the rest of the stuff that's over here was with the palette. But the point is, that stuff is all discussed. If you didn't like my explanation, it is discussed in here. They explain in some depth and breadth of coverage what this stuff is in here. Okay? So again, they show you constraining. This is how we started on day one, right? You saw that hello world thing in there. All right? And they go over baselines and some other stuff. Again, I'm not saying it's not important. Of course it's important. Here they explain what each one of those numbers means. All right? So what you see here, I'm on page 64. That basically is kind of like a up close and personal of what we have right here. Okay? And I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, it's the old 80-20 rule. I'm giving you 20% of the stuff that you're going to use 80% of the time. All right? And there's things in here that if you say, hey, do you know how to do that? And I would think to myself, well, now I do. All right? All right, so they show horizontal and vertical control here. They talk more about orientation. And I don't know if it mentions it in here, but again, we will talk about orientation inside of the Android manifest file. All right. Then they get into editing the XML directly. And again, you've seen this or you've heard me talk about this already, but if I come in here and I click on this button, doesn't matter which one, I'll just click on the exit and I'll go over to code mode. All right? And I find that exit button, and it's the last one, so it's right there. I can go in and manually change this stuff. What has changed over time that a lot of people don't like is these constraints. Now notice it says start to end of, top to bottom of, etc. And margin top and margin end. Like the biggest thing is the word start. It used to always be left, and end used to always be the word right. It bugged a lot of people, I believe, when they changed that kind of stuff. All right? But if you're not sure, for instance, let's just say I know I want to set margins. Let's pretend for a second there's no margin set here. You with me? I'm just pretend there's no margin set. If I type in margin, it's going to show you all the different things in the IntelliSense are going to kick in and show you all the different stuff that you can set. Here's a question for you. Back from the days of AWD1112, what else did we work with other than margin that worked almost just like margin? What else did we work with? So you can set padding Just like you can set margin. I don't know if we've got any padding set in this one or not, but you can do that. All right, and again, the more meticulous you are when you're working on your final project, it's not that your grade will be better, but the better it'll look. If you're going to put something out on the App Store, and I'll be honest with you, I had two apps out on the App Store, and both of them have been pulled. And the reason they've been pulled, all I have to do is go back in and change some of the files. They added a couple more things that you have to put in there by default. And they're like, this game isn't dangerous for kids or something like that. They didn't have it when I downloaded that stuff there. So they have suspended, when I go to the Google Play Store and look at my stuff, they're both been suspended until I fix that. All right, so again, there's stuff in here. And I've said this to you before too, and I want to make sure you know this. If you look at this example here, notice it's a linear layout. And there's a button and then there's a text view. It puts things into that file based on the order you drag them out on the screen, not the order in which they appear on the screen. So if you want those to basically dovetail with one another, you have to manually go into this file and fix it, to my knowledge. All right. This referencing a view, I'm jumping up to page 69. If you look at here, you have maybe not seen this exactly, but you've seen the thing with strings. You've got the @string type of thing, and then a slash, and then that means go to the string file, and that's the name of it there, type of thing. All right, then they talk about positioning, and there's a thing on linear layout. Okay? And there'll be some other stuff in here too. If you decide you want to play with positioning and change something around, go ahead and do it. It's not going to bother me any. All right? I'm more concerned, again, that all of you, by the time you finish this class, should be pretty good at creating interfaces. All right? But I'm more concerned that you're able to put the Java code in there to make those interfaces do what they're supposed to do. All right. So here's the resources file up on page 72. So if you want more about Drawable, you'll notice there's layout there. We will create our own layout when we get into talking about Recyclerview. Menu, we'll also add a menu at that time. All right. The big thing with a menu, and you all know this already, but if I come in here and I run this program, and this is simulating my phone. One thing about this is, if you look at it, if you've never heard the term before, when you look at a phone especially, it's got LRE, limited real estate. In other words, you only have so much on a phone, and that's why a lot of times when you go to a mobile view of a company, they won't have a lot of their pictures on there because they don't do it justice to put it on a phone, or they're too big or whatever. All right. Oops. Try that again. So, as far as that goes then, come on, open up, would you? Not that one. That one. Okay. If you want to know more about some of this stuff, if you think I'm not talking about it enough, but, again, looking at this, typically your menu goes right here. See this? Right there. It's not that it has to go there, but by default, that's typically where people put it. And a lot, when you think about it, technically, I didn't even need this up here, did I? I've got BMI calculator twice, so I could have removed it from here or removed it from here. All right? But when you start to set up menus, there's things, for example, there's options like show if room. So in other words, if there's room to show it on the screen, it'll show it. And also, I'm not going to create a big drop-down menu with 5 or 6 different things, because if people are looking at it on their phone, that's not going to make any sense to them. A lot of times what you'll find is when people have menus, it'll be for very common operations, and if possible, they won't even use words. They'll just bring images up there. All right, like, a garbage if you want to delete something, that kind of thing. All right. So here's the strings file. I don't think there's anything in here that we haven't already talked about. Again, there are a couple shortcuts to get to some of these screens that didn't go over with you. All right, a lot of them I don't remember. I was like, oh yeah, that's how you do that. Okay. Yeah, like this extract thing. There's different ways of doing this, is what I'm saying. You can bring this up when you do the extract resource. All right. So in other words, what they're saying here is this. Okay. If notice in here they've got a button. The button has on it text. See this? So if you right mouse click on it where it says text, you're going to get this in there amongst other things. And it'll say extract string resource is the first one. If you choose it, it'll show you a screen like this, where it'll have the name of the resource. You put in the value that you want it to have right there. Typically, that's all you have to put in. You click OK, and it'll set that for you in your strings file. So that's a little bit easier than the way we were doing it. We didn't have that many strings, and so I figured what we were doing was not that difficult for anybody. You want more on colors than I gave you, which wasn't much. All right. Here on page 75, they're talking about using the colors.xml file. I've mentioned you get primary and secondary colors by default. You can come in and add anything you want to that. Some people do that, and they really customize the colors file. Other people go into themes, and which I think is on here next, and they go in and they play with the colors and stuff, and they make a theme out of it, rather than grabbing and changing the default stuff. All right. Again, it's your call. There's a dimensions thing in here. All right. And it says to make dimensions easier to manage, it says you should separate them from your code. What does that mean? Well, for instance, in my dimensions file, I could come in there and say, as an example, I could set up different sizes for things. So I wouldn't have to always worry. Let's suppose that I have a fairly complex app with a lot of screens, and I've got 3 button sizes. I could put in 3 button sizes in here. Then when I set up buttons, rather than having to worry about the sizes, etc., I could just put in the names. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Styles, again, some of that goes into getting in with themes, but it says common attributes such as height, padding, font, etc. Styles are meant for attributes that modify the look of the view. And again, the idea is most people are comfortable when you create an app that when you have things, the buttons are the same size, for example. All right? All right. It says Android Studio here, I'm on page 77, defines other resources that are covered in other chapters. I'm not going to read those because we'll talk about them in other chapters. All right. So responding to view clicks, here's what I showed you. All right. And when I do want you to realize, you probably already did, but in case you didn't, when we went in here, go to design view. So for example, for the exit, when we came in there, I've removed the on clicks from here. But if I go in here and I go back and I add exit program, all right, if I go back and add that, now if I go and look at this in code mode, notice what they put in. You can put it in either one. So that's even a third way that you can set this up. So I showed you, basically writing it, you can either write it first and then put it in the on-click, or you can put it in the on-click and then write it, or you can put it here, all right, or you can do the listener that I just showed you. And I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I think if I remove this from here and I go back again into design mode, I think it automatically removes it from here. All right, so I'm here. Let's go to on-click and see if it removed it. Yeah, it's gone. Okay? All right. Updating a view, as it says, to update a view, for example, rather to replace the text. In a text view, your code must first instantiate an object. What the heck does that mean? Remember that we had to go in, and that's when at the top of our program we did like edit text, ET height, all right? And then later we said ET height equals find view by ID. And then in parentheses we had like r.id.et height type of thing. That's what they're getting to in here. All right. Here's more about the text view. The key thing with the text view, again, a text view is kind of like kind of like a label. To me, if you understand get text and set text, there's not that much more that you have to worry about. There are attributes in here, as it says, that talk about positioning. I'm going to ask you this question, and I may bring it up more than once. Look on the screen, please. Anybody remember what wrap content and match parent are and the difference between them?
Content sizes your thing to the inner, and the matching parent sizes it to the maximum size.
That's
of the
correct.
Parent.
So that's one way of putting it. I always just say that wrap content says use only the amount of space you need, and match parent says use all the space you possibly can. All right, that's the big difference between them. And you don't have to set width and height. You do not have to set these to wrap content or match parent. You can put a DP size in there. So if you wanted your screen to be 300 by 300, you could set the width and the height to both be 300 DP. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So here's some of the other stuff, the text color, the text appearance. I went over a lot of this stuff with you because, again, I thought it would make more sense to make a change and have you see it directly on the screen. All right, then do this. All right. Using embedded tags in text. It says in an app that accesses magazine or newspaper articles, the articles that appear would probably come from an online source or might be saved in advance. It says in either case, the text may contain embedded HTML tags. To properly display this, you must format them according to these rules. So in other words, if you are going to be referencing an article in an app that you create and that article is an HTML page someplace, you'd have to read through this. All right? Referring to a text view and code, this is exactly what I was talking about right here. Now, look at this. It used to be, if you can't read this, look on your page. I'm on page 83. It used to be in here, you had to always cast. So this is a text view. You had to take find view by ID and cast it to the type of variable it was. About a year ago, they changed that, so the casting is no longer necessary. You will still see it in code, and if you still do it, it does not give you an error. All right? But there's no reason to do it anymore. What's the word? It's superfluous, all right, to do that. All right, then they talk a little bit about a scroll view. All right, yeah, if you want to do scrolling, I'm not going to get into that any more than you can read that if you're interested. All right? That's going to push us way down here a ways. All the way to page 89. All right, and we're just about finished, but it says here, resources to help you learn. Virtually all of the ones that you're going to see in here, they're going to be links to developer.android.com. All right? And there's the documentation. Again, that's not how the documentation looks anymore. Oreo isn't the most up-to-date version. But they have some other stuff in here. I just want to mention this to you. It says, this page contains a wealth of information kept current by Google. To start exploring, you can click the following links. Get Android Studio, we've already done that. Browse sample code. There is sample code in there. There are sample templates in there, etc. Why am I telling you that? Well, it may be that what you might want to do is if you decide, you're going to create the next great app, whatever that is, all right, you're thinking about doing it now, you might want to Google it, not to see if someone else has done it, but to see if Android has already got a template for you that might make it much easier for you to set things up. And as it says, there's watch stories in there, and they'll have clips from developers talking about what's so great and etc. about it. All right, Android Studio page. Again, it doesn't look like that anymore. Here's more Android Studio documentation. You can go out, just so you know, I was going to print this out for you, but I'm not going to lie to you. I don't use them. So let me show you real quick. I'm going to come into here. You can go out and look. Notice keyboard shortcuts. I just typed in Android Studio shortcuts. So here's keyboard shortcuts. 11 Android shortcuts every developer must know. There are a lot of ways that you can make perusing your way around Android Studio easier. All right. I mean, I just kind of gave it to you basic, for lack of better words. There's stuff we'll later get into talking about material design, what that is, why that is, etc. And there's some developer stuff in here. So there is a lot of really good stuff in here. All right. Watching the developer videos, I already showed you that if you do go out and Google, Android, whatever it was, Google Android, that you can see some of those videos. Some of them are pretty good, some of them are not. This is what I mentioned before, code samples. All right. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean when you get your next test, you go out to code samples right away. I mean, I expect you to be doing it on your own. All right. Notice that there's the activity templates. So if you want, they're talking about them. That's pretty much it as far as yep, that's it. Now, one more thing before we'll call it a period here. So let's do this. Do it like this. Here we go. All right. So we've gone through all of this right now. Build your first app. Okay? Lesson 2, which I believe is much shorter, is on activities and intents. All right? The reason I'm mentioning that to you is intents have to do with you being able to pass information from one activity to another activity and maybe even back again. All right? That's what that is all about. So what we will do next, not today, not even, we'll see when we do it, if we start next week or not, but we will work with maybe even still the BMI program, and we'll take that information where we'll have two other pages, two other activities. So one, what we can do is we can push, when we give the person the information about them, we'll put it on another page. And then we'll add an image view, so if they're underweight, we can have a picture of a skinny person type of thing. And then finally, for the thing at the end, which I use the unsuccessful toast with, we'll have a totals page. So you'll be able to jump to any of those 3 pages, all right, and then go back again. So this one, I don't know how long this one is, even if it shows. I don't know if the pages are numbered in here or not, so, all right. But I know it's a lot shorter than the last one was. You could probably go over this whole thing in one period, I would guess. So 1:30, get yourself a break. Afterwards, the rest of the period today is lab, so you've got 2 hours and 20 minutes or 25, whatever it is today. All period tomorrow, no class on Monday. We'll see where we are on Tuesday, all right?
I'm having a problem. I don't know what's going on. I've tried doing the build, clean project, rebuild project,
Uh-huh.
and that doesn't work.
Are you
I've tried.
you're opening
I-
and it's
I run my project, and I click the guess number button, and it crashes. Right now, I have nothing in the function that the button calls, but it still crashes.
All right, I'll tell you what, take a break, and after the break, I'll look at what you've got. I'm not saying I'll be able to come up with an answer, but I'll be more than happy to take a look at it.
You can basically clear like what's on your emulator. Like right away.
Clear what's on the emulator. Do you know how to do it?
If you got junk in the emulator, we talked about this the first day, you can go over to the Android Virtual Device Manager, the AWD Manager.
Oh, right.
You can go and bring up your emulator screen, so you go down where it says Create New Device, find your emulator, go way over to the right mouse click on it, and tell it to wipe your data.
Right, that's it. That's what it is.
Okay, let's figure out that.
But
And if that doesn't work, you might even want to do a cold reboot on it. I mean, again, it's software, and I'm not lying, it's not always the most reliable software. Okay, I'm supposed to ask you guys this. It's early. You guys don't have to listen, but you 3 have to listen. Are any of you 3 planning on going to the actual graduation ceremony in May?
I didn't.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is since it's in St. Louis, it's at the Shea Fitz Arena, and since St. Louis has a mask mandate, and they also, they're going to be, I'm going to send this to you guys, but just so you see it. And it's going to have the requirements. So basically, you have to have that you got a negative test within a week of it or whatever it is. It's all in there. But I'm going to send that to you right now. All right, if you go, well, I don't want to do any of that. Then just don't go. All right? And you'll still get your diploma, and if you don't know this, if you walk through the line, they don't give you your diploma. You walk through the line, they give you the sheath that holds the diploma. Because your diploma usually takes about 6 weeks from the time you graduate. If after you graduate you need proof of graduation, the school can provide that for you. All right, so Gabriel's going for a job, and well, we need to know for sure you got this degree. Yeah, you can just contact the business office, I think it is, at St. Louis, and they'll send you an official letter. But I'm going to send this to you right now. And that's why I'm showing it to you. I think it's for you guys. They've already been telling us, because they have not had it for the last year or two because of COVID, and they would like to have it this year. All right, it's funny because you might laugh at this, but it's either really novel or really stupid. Where I used to work at Blackhawk, they had their ceremony last year, and literally you drove up in your car. And they had hundreds of cars in there. People were coming up and they were giving them their diplomas. But they were trying to do it in a way that wasn't going to make it, hurt anybody, etc. I think it took a lot longer because you had a ton of cars in there. All right. Well, I'll send it to you guys too. Technically, you don't need it, but what they will tell you is, if you want to, it's almost funny, but if the plan is hopefully for both of you to graduate in December. You can come back in May if you want and go through the ceremony. I've never heard of a person who's done that, but they do that because they don't have a special ceremony for December grads. So I'm taking this right now, and let's see if you're going to be part of the graduation ceremony. It's going to be Saturday, May 7th at the Chaffetz Arena. That's where it's always been. They got a thing in there for you guys and for guests, etc. Plus, they also have the St. Louis Job Fair is going to be March 17th. So we're talking almost exactly 2 months from today. And the one in Wentzville, which you may or may not want to go to, is going to be at the end of March 31st. So you got it now.